Everybody, Josh here from Fearscape Paranormal Podcast, Fearscape Media Network. I just wanted to take a couple minutes and show you some stuff that I'm playing around with Google Earth. So let me just switch to share my screen here real quick, and we'll take a look at what we got going on. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, I highly recommend that you go out and get Google Earth Pro. Most people are probably interested or used to using Google Earth in their web browser or in their app on their phone. Um, but Google Earth Pro is a full downloadable software program. I'm on a Mac, but you can also get it installed on Linux machine. You can get it installed on a Windows machine, so on and so forth. You can just go to Google um, Google Earth Pro, download, and you should find it and can download it. And then once you got it downloaded, um, the folks have put together all kinds of different overlays that you can get for Google Earth. And one of the overlays that I'm working with today and have been working with over the last couple of weeks is one that puts in place, and it takes it just a minute to load when you apply it, but you'll see it here in just a minute all across the United States. Um, all the different UFO, UAP sightings um, from like the last 50 years. Water. And so every single one of these little dots all over this map is one or more sightings. Like if you click on one of them, you might get an expansion out. So each one of these little dots in this expansion is a sighting. And so you can go to each one and click on it, and you'll see additional information and potentially where it's linked or located. So to actually read more about it, you just click the hyperlink. Some of that information, some of these sightings don't have um, a source link, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to find one that doesn't just off the bat. But um, any one of these that has multiple listings, again, it's a very comprehensive display of these various UFO, UAP sightings over the years. And I mean, my generalization is that it goes back 50 years, just because I've been able to find some sighting information listed that goes back into the 60s and the 50s and other places. And I mean, New Fork. If most of this information is coming from New Fork, here's a good example where one that doesn't have a link. But if most of this information is coming from New Fork, then it likely, New Fork's been around or allows for the posting of older sightings, even though you could post it today for a sighting that was happened several years ago. So, bottom line is, looking at this data using Google Earth to see, is there any correlations between where sightings had happen, or rather the concentration of where sightings happen as it relates to water. And so, the only thing that I've really seen so far, and this makes sense from a population perspective, is that there are significant groupings of sightings around major cities, which that makes sense because there are more people, right, in a major city that would see and report a sighting than there are people that are outside of a major city. Some of the larger cities, like up here around Washington, has a big concentration. New York, New Jersey, huge concentration. Philadelphia, Cleveland, Chicago. My goodness, look at the concentration here. So, um, yeah, it's just very interesting. All this being able to pull this data together and put it on a map and start to look at correlations. So, one of the other things that I really started thinking about a couple of days ago is ley lines, and so I went out and found an overlay that includes ley lines, and I started thinking, what if ley lines are like the super highway, if you will, of UFO UAPs, and where you look at, UAP or UFO sightings, are they in close proximity to ley lines? And you look at Chicago here, there are two ley lines that go directly through Chicago. Now there are sightings that are away from the ley lines, but just like you could get on the interstate and drive between cities, there are off ramps and on ramps as you go. And so, my thought is that if I can get enough evidence to be able to say that, ley lines do behave as some sort of a highway system around the globe, because if I zoom out here, you'll see that, I mean, ley lines extend all around the globe. My UFO UAP data is only for the United States, but I haven't looked to see if there's data that that exists for Google Earth that covers anything outside of the United States. But you look here, Roswell, New Mexico. Everybody knows the case in Roswell, New Mexico, right? Well, look, there's a ley line that runs here. Um, there's a ley line that runs here too, and I believe, based on especially that new show on Discovery Plus that talks about the Roswell case, they talk about the crash actually being closer to like this little triangle area here in these ley lines than actually directly in Roswell. So yeah, it's interesting to think about. Look at over here at Phoenix. You got the Phoenix lights, right? So look at all these ley lines that kind of cross around Phoenix and then converge. There's a convergence point down here in the Sonora Desert. There's nothing there, by the way. If we zoom in, I mean, there's really nothing there. There's a little town here in Mexico, but for the most part, there's nothing there for that convergence point. And there's a couple other convergence points, around the globe. There's one up here in Salt Lake City. Oddly enough, is a not a major convergence point, but you can see there are several different lines that intersect up here in on the lake up here for Salt Lake City. Um, so it's just again thinking about, are these craft or entities or whatever they are they traveling? Is their propulsion system for the craft maybe dependent upon the electromagnetic field that maybe exists as a part of a ley line? And so, yeah, so that's just what I'm looking at here using this data set with all the UAP UFO sightings, and then overlay it with ley lines and see if there's any correlations that can be drawn, and potentially. I mean, look right here. This line here, this green line here that kind of cuts through Kentucky. When you get to Kentucky, look at all of these sightings that are like right on the line, that intersect the line almost. Look at here in Tennessee, all of these sightings that intersect this line. Um, Even here, this orange line here that kind of cuts up through Texas and Oklahoma and Missouri. Look at all of these sightings that are intersecting along this ley line. Now, one could argue that the um, density of the sightings across this part of the country and the fact that you're overlaying ley lines on top of that, then the probability is high that you're going to have intersection points. I understand that, but just because something has a high probability doesn't necessarily mean that it's just a coincidence. So, anyways, interested to know what your thoughts are on that. Again, look down here, this area right here, Houston. Look at all of these spots, and then the ley lines that intersect and go through the Houston area. Um, you don't look here. You don't have quite as many in the Mississippi and Alabama area right around here because there's maybe only one ley line that intersects this point. Does the propensity or number of ley lines that intersect in a given area, is that what drives how many sightings that area has? I mean, look, you got Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee creates this nice little triangle, if you will, of ley lines, and look at all the sightings that are happening in that area. Let's look over here in Washington D.C. Oh my goodness, there's a ley line that crosses right through Washington D.C. and look at all of the sightings that happen here. Uh, Again, a ley line that crosses almost directly through New York, and look at all the sightings that happen here. So look at all these scattered of sightings around this major intersection point of several different ley lines. So again, this is just a theory that I'm working with. I'm curious what you all think. Again, look at this cluster here in Minnesota and these two ley lines that kind of frame the area, if you will. So there's just, it seems to be too great of of a similarity for it to just be coincidence, overlaying ley lines and uh, the number of sightings in the area. So, curious to know what your all's thoughts are. Had you ever thought about this before? And if so, what's an experiment that we could do to test this theory? Would it be to maybe to go to some of these intersection points of ley lines and look for UFO, UAP, see if we see them more frequently there? Right here in Colorado is a good example. Of course, this spot in the middle of the desert next to the Mexico border, and Arizona is a good one. Um, Down here in Houston, even in Kentucky, there's an intersection here. This is oddly enough in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Um, so it's which is close to so Bowling Green. The If you're not familiar with the Hopkinsville, Kentucky case with the Hopkins Kelly, Kentucky, but Kelly, Kentucky is right around this area. Um, probably have to zoom way in for it to show up on the map because it's such a small little town. But Kelly, Kentucky is right around in this area, and if I remember correctly, it's almost in line as the crow flies with Evansville, the Evansville area. So it's like right around in here somewhere. And so you've got these two ley lines. And if there was a crash, I mean, they're traveling along on the Earth's superhighway and get a flat tire, so to speak, and crash off in Kelly. Here's Hopkinsville right here. So Kelly's right around in here somewhere, potentially right on this ley line, maybe. I don't know how far I'm going to have to zoom in to see it. But yeah, so just again, things that I'm thinking about and would like to know your all's thoughts and opinions on. So keep up the hunt. Interested in seeing videos and pictures. So you can send any of your sightings that you have, information sightings that you have for UFO, UAP, ghost, cryptid, Bigfoot, whatever the case may be. You can send any of those things over to fearscapepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear about them, and we'll share them with our audience if permission is given. So thank you all, and have a wonderful afternoon.